While I was investigating one of Jaheira's many bugs, I made a discovery that can turn her into the most powerful character in Baldur's Gate 3, completely transforming a playthrough in the last act of the game. And the setup is so simple that many people have done it on accident without realizing the power that they'd unlocked. Let me explain. If you do not invite Jaheira into the group while you're on the roof of Moonrise Towers, then when you find her in the throne room after leaving the colony, she is given a hidden status that overrides her normal friendly faction with a neutral one. When you finish Act 2, that status is removed and Jaheira's faction goes back to normal. However, if you invite Jaheira into the party while she still has that hidden status, but then kick her out again before the end of Act 2, that neutral faction gets saved as her default for the rest of the game. And that's all it takes to start a cascade of side effects once you reach Act 3. For example, if Jaheira triggers this ambush while no one else is around, the fish will ignore her while they run around mingling with the locals and doing some shopping. Same thing happens even if the whole party runs into a group of hostile NPCs and starts combat, because Jaheira is not an enemy to these doppelgangers and she's not an ally to the party members. This is also what stops her from casting most buff spells onto the other characters. While everyone else is stuck in combat, Jaheira can run around in real time, which lets her heal the party by casting spells and throwing potions, or even helping them up if they're downed, all without joining the fight. But if she attacks any of the NPCs, she will get pulled into combat. Well, with a few exceptions, and this is where it gets interesting. First, if the NPC is a beast, Jaheira won't go into combat by attacking it. Why only beasts, I have no idea. There aren't a lot of them in Act 3, but this could come in handy. The next exception is if Jaheira kills the target in one hit, she won't go into combat with any remaining NPCs that are still in the fight. That could be pretty useful for a rogue, since she can make as many sneak attacks as she wants. Finally, if the NPC is confused, Jaheira won't be pulled into combat by attacking it. But unfortunately, bosses and most other powerful enemies are immune to confused. Just kidding, nothing is immune to confused. Well, except these things. You can confuse robots, ghosts, or even flaming boulders. And as long as you cast confusion while that NPC is already in combat with someone else, Jaheira can attack them as much as she wants, letting her wipe out the entire battlefield while everyone else is frozen in time. The world! 時は動き出す. And with this much power at her fingertips, I figured I have got to turn this into some kind of challenge. So how about this? Can Jaheira finish Act 3 without ever going into combat? But if we're going to make this into a proper puzzle to solve, I gotta lay down some strict rules. Rule number 1, Shadowheart is just here to escort Jaheira around the city and start each fight, but she can only do that by walking or talking. She's not allowed to use any kind of ability or attack any NPC. And once a fight begins, Shadowheart is not allowed to take any action or move. She's just as frozen as the enemy. Rule number 2, no consumable use of any kind, including barrels. And let's cross crates off the list too. Sorry, Proxy. All damage or other effects can only come from spells Jaheira has learned by leveling up or from items she has equipped. And just to get these out of the way, no twist of fortune and no kidnapping. Rule number 3, no party followers, which means no summons, dominated, or any other help from attached NPCs. Rule number 4, we're doing this challenge on honor mode difficulty. I won't truly be using a single save for the purposes of making the video, but I'll play as though I am. Which means nothing that relies on luck, even if the chance of success is very high. If something could go wrong, I gotta play like it will. And finally, Jaheira has to do the whole run as a single class. It doesn't have to be her default druid, but once I pick a class for the challenge, she has to stick to it with no respecking and no multiclassing. All 6 of these classes can cast Confusion, but if all it took to beat this challenge was that one spell, I wouldn't have bothered making the video. In fact, only one class has the wide variety of spells I need to complete this challenge, and that's Wizard. Specifically, Evocation Wizard, with these stats. Charisma doesn't matter, but Wisdom is set that low for a reason. You'll see why if you watch long enough. With Jaheira's first 2 feats being used to pump her intelligence up to 20 since we need her spell save DC to be as high as possible. Because, in combat, rolling a 20 on a saving throw is not an automatic success. And that means if Jaheira's spell save DC is equal to the enemy's saving throw bonus plus 20 plus 1, the spell has a 100% chance to land, even though the cursor still says 95%. And this is essential for that no luck rule, because if I got really unlucky and burned through all of Jaheira's confusion cast before I got one to stick, there's no way to long rest or even short rest while Shadowheart is still stuck in combat. Right now at level 10, with just these items from Act 1 and 2, Jaheira's spell save DC is 21. Which is high enough to confuse a few NPCs, but most of them are going to take more than that, so we gotta start by heading to the lower city to get our hands on some upgrades. On the way there, Jaheira gets her own unique response at the checkpoint. And even though she has no tadpole, somehow the Steel Watcher scans her anyway. Now that we've made it to the lower city, we can head to—
It seems that events at Denthalans have overtaken us.
Oh, whoops, sorry Jaheira, but we would have had to skip that fight anyway. Because that one encounter sets all the doppelgangers as hostile specifically to Jaheira, regardless of her current faction. But don't worry, we'll be rescuing Minsc pretty soon. First, we gotta stop by Jaheira's house and let her catch up with her family. But our real reason for coming here is in the basement, where she can have a conversation with herself about herself while she walks right over all her traps. You'd think Jaheira would carry the key to her own secret room, but instead she has to knock the door to get in there and grab her prize, Khalid's gift. Wearing this lets her sneak into the Stormshore Tabernacle basement and swipe the Amulet of the Devout without getting cursed. After that, we'll swing by Helsik's shop to buy the Cloak of the Weave, bringing Jaheira's spell save DC up to 24. Which is enough to guarantee confusion lands on most normal enemies like these
Sawagan.
Though to speed up the killing part, I'll be using an upcasted Shadow Blade in the main hand and another one from the ring in the offhand. And since Jaheira never goes into combat, she can use her spell DC gear to cast confusion, then swap to the Shadow Blades for damage. Of course, I could roll infinite ones, but since the confused condition only ticks down on the enemy's turn, it'll last forever, which gives Jaheira infinite attacks without entering combat. And as we all know, over an infinite amount of time, anything that can happen will happen, so this doesn't count as luck. Carrying the Resonance Stone would speed things up even more, but since Jaheira doesn't really equip it, let's consider it against the rules. And since basic encounters like this one really are as simple as just casting confusion and stabbing everything, I'll only be showing the important fights from this point on. The first of which is Auntie Ethel, since we want that ring she drops. But before we get that far, the first obstacle to overcome is these barrels, since I did say that Shadowheart is only allowed to walk and talk, not jump. Which leaves telekinesis as my only option to get her over this insurmountable hurdle. Though she's going to stay put for now, while Jaheira heads in alone, has a chat with the masks, and then clears the way into Ethel's room. The hag won't come out of hiding until Jaheira destroys one of the mushrooms, which requires me to use Bone Chill to stop them from healing. When Auntie Ethel does pop up, she'll start threatening Shadowheart, even though she's still waiting back at the entrance. That sets the hag as hostile to any normal party members, but of course she's still neutral to Jaheira. Which gives me all the time I need to destroy the other 2 mushrooms, since each one still standing gives Ethel a +5 bonus to her saving throws. Finally, I'm ready for Shadowheart to stroll in and start the fight. And since enemies ever taking a turn could lead to chaos, I've loaded Shadowheart up with initiative gear to ensure that she always goes first. Even with all those mushrooms gone, the hag's wisdom save bonus is still higher than Jaheira's passive spell DC. which means I'm going to need to use Arcane Acuity to push that number a bit higher. Fortunately, there are plenty of odds and ends in the room to smack and build up the buff, and Ethel can't complain because she's too busy staring at Shadowheart. Turn-based mode lets me freeze the timer on the Acuity buff while I line up Confusion, then unpause, swap to Jaheira's blades, toggle on non-lethal attacks, and stab the hag over and over until a kid pops out. More importantly, the piñata also produced this particular piece of jewelry, which gives a +1 bonus to spell save DC, even though it's not written on the tooltip. Mystic Carrion has the next item we want, but infiltrating his house is surprisingly tricky if you fail the perception roll at the entrance. To get in, I had to jump up here, knock this door, use invisibility to sneak past the ghouls, and Misty step through this other door to open the way for Shadowheart. Of course, the item I want is the Hood of the Weave, which I could just buy, but where's the fun in that? If we want Mystic Carrion to stay dead, we gotta destroy his heart before we fight him, but there's also another issue. Carrion's Wisdom save bonus is so high, Jaheira would need 30 spell DC to land Confusion. That's doable with a few stacks of Acuity, but he also has Legendary Resistance, which pushes the requirement up to 40, a number that's impossible for her to reach. Sure, I could burn through 3 extra spell slots to strip his legendary resistance off, but I got a better way. Casting the Light cantrip on a neutral NPC doesn't count as attacking them, but they will still roll a saving throw to try and prevent it. This lets me remove legendary resistance from Mystic Carrion by just casting Light on him again and again until he uses up all 3 stacks of his buff. And this ain't the only place that trick works, by the way. To get Carrion's heart, we're headed to the Ancient Lair, where Jaheira can burgle to her heart's content since the undead will ignore her and Khalid's gift prevents the curse. But opening the door to the secret room requires passing a perception check, which bad luck Jaheira can never do. Fortunately, Wizard Ingenuity provides her with an alternate method of entry. In here, I'm reading the note, but leaving the other jars alone. You'll see why in a minute. Then I'll give Thrumbo some indigestion, grab the heart, and return to Philgrave's mansion. Destroying any of the jars will turn Mystic Carrion hostile, so before I give him a heart attack, I'll tuck Shadowheart into a comfy spot away from the action. Because if she ever gets hit by Confusion during a fight, all hell is going to break loose. With that done, Jaheira drops the heart in a safe spot and lights it up to make Carrion mad at Shadowheart back in the other room. I already removed his legendary resistance earlier, but I still need to cast Light on Carrion one more time to bait out his legendary action. Then use Protection from Evil to cleanse the fear from Jaheira and remove Curse on Carrion to wipe away his invulnerability. But before I try to confuse him, I'll be killing some of the undead since the Battle Mage gloves give stacks of Acuity just from hitting someone with a Shadow Blade. Now Jaheira's DC is pumped up high enough to land Confusion, stab him a few times, and swipe his hat, bringing her passive spell save DC up to 26. That number will be important in the counting house, which is our next destination, since Jaheira got word that an old friend is waiting there. But even with her silver tongue, we still failed to convince the clerk to let us in without handing over 10,000 gold, which is more than we got. So I'm gonna have to get the bank pass the old-fashioned way, by stealing it. But getting into position to knock the head clerk's office door puts Jaheira just close enough to get spotted by the guard. To avoid that, I'll just bust down this other door, which gets no reaction from the guard, since apparently vandalism is less of a crime than loitering. But doing that also gives me the angle I need to cast Knock on the office door from far enough away to avoid the guard's attention. Then just sneak in and swipe the bank pass and we're good to go. Jaheira never bothered to learn the code to unlock this vault door, but that's not going to stop a wizard from getting inside. We needed 26 spell DC before coming here because it's just enough to guarantee that See Invisibility will reveal these Reapers, and she only gets one chance on each of them. That lets Jaheira see and confuse them, but the Reapers also have Sanctuary on, so how is she going to deal with that? By just attacking straight through it. You see, the way Sanctuary works is that anyone who has the buff projects an aura around them with a 30-meter radius. All enemies within that aura are given a hidden condition that prevents them from attacking the sanctuary character. But since Jaheira isn't an enemy, she's not affected. After mopping up all the cultists and finding a clue on one of the bodies, we're off to Minsc's super secret sewer hideout. If I send Jaheira in alone, it prevents Minsc from detecting her since she doesn't have a brain slug. The room will be hostile to Shadowheart, but won't start combat until they see her, which gives Jaheira the chance to sneak around.
Stone Lord, we have some uninvited guests.
Okay, she should be hostile to the whole party right now, which would prevent this dialogue from ever playing. Can fake Jaheira sense when neutral Jaheira is nearby? Bumping into her like that makes the room hostile to Jaheira too, so instead we gotta send Shadowheart in first to get the fight going properly. Jaheira can ignore the others and start things off by knocking out Minsc, but due to her lack of a tadpole, she can't save him on her own. So we gotta finish off the rest of them first, which will be easy since Imposter Jaheira's wisdom score is really low. Wait, what? On Tactician or Honor difficulty, Fake Jaheira has a unique passive that gives her a bonus of 99 to any saving throw made against a non-enemy character. And I'll stress again, the whole party should be hostile to her at this point, which would normally make that passive meaningless. Did Larian know I was going to try this? It turns out the hard counter to Jaheira is herself. Fine, if we can't confuse her, then we'll go with plan B. At level 10, Evocation Wizard adds their intelligence bonus to the damage of any evocation spell. In the case of Magic Missile, the bonus is added to each spark equipped. Jaheira's level 6 Magic Missile 2 damage with an minimum 9 damage per Callous Blow for an additional 2 damage for a total minimum damage of 92. That's almost enough, but if I got really unlucky, it still might not kill her. So if we make her wet first, it'll double the lightning damage, giving us enough for a guaranteed kill. Now, Jaheira does technically go into combat for a split second there, so if you think that counts as failing the challenge, then we'd have to use Plan C. When you begin a jump, if you quickly drag a spell off your bar before the animation finishes, you end up in a state that Ruby, who discovered it, calls Ghost Mode. In this state, the game gets confused about what your real position is, allowing you to hit enemies with melee attacks without entering combat. So why didn't I just use this trick the whole time? Well, for one thing, it's a lot slower, since you need to move back out of melee range before each attack. But there's another reason this trick wouldn't work on everyone that I'll get to later. Lorroakan is an easy target, so let's take him out next. But involving Night Song in the fight makes it much more complicated for Jaheira to stay out of combat, so we're going to keep our trip a secret from her for now. Walking through the portal with Shadowheart will immediately begin the conversation with Lorroakan, and that dialogue has our only chance to start combat with him. But doing that with Jaheira in tow will pull her into the fight too, because this is one of the many dialogues that's scripted to turn an NPC hostile toward anyone in the party that was in range of the conversation. And we can't leave Jaheira outside because as soon as the fight starts, the portal closes. However, that dialogue only auto-starts in 3 different situations. One is if the avatar character clicks the portal. The next is if specifically Gale clicks the portal, since he has unique dialogue with Lorroakan.
Well, don't stand on ceremony. Out with it.
Carsus.
The third auto-start scenario happens if more than one companion goes through the portal at the same time. So, if we send in Jaheira alone, she can position herself far away from Lorroakan before Shadowheart walks in and starts the dialogue manually. And being in this position at the end of the fight will be useful later, as you'll see. Jaheira is 1 point short of enough spell DC for a guaranteed confusion on Lorroakan, so we still need some arcane acuity. The Battle Mage gloves are so goofy, they'll give stacks of acuity just from picking up and throwing anything with a health bar. We can easily hit the whole room with 1 level 6 confusion while carefully dodging Shadowheart. But casting anything on Lorroakan will trigger his elemental retort, which could easily do enough damage to one-shot Jaheira. Luckily, that doesn't matter. Because even though Lorroakan's reaction will go off, the damage spell itself will only target enemies, which means it's stabbing time. But as soon as the last enemy dies, Roland will barge in and interrogate Shadowheart, and there's no way to avoid killing him without passing a skill check. This is why I moved Shadowheart way over here before starting the fight, since I can just head to camp before Roland gets in range to talk. Whenever you long rest after killing Lorroakan, Roland will always take over the tower and become one of your allies for the endgame. Afterward, if I head back to the top of the tower, he's still programmed to run up and accuse us of murdering his boss. But Angry Roland and Happy he took over the tower Roland are in the same dialogue file, with Happy having a higher priority. So he's forced to be nice to us. I'd love to get Markahesh here, but passing this Arcana roll would require luck, which is against the rules. It is possible to guarantee you get it by using summons to melee attack the lever, which forces them to make the roll, and then just using a new summon every time they fail. But since summons are also against the rules, this beautiful staff is going to stay under the dome. And that robe really would have fit Jaheira's nature vibe too. If I want to do the Iron Throne at all, I gotta bend the no combat rule, because anyone going through the hatch will put the whole party into what's called narrative combat. And freeing Duke Ravengard or a Mellowum will attach them to the party as followers, but I won't be using them to do anything but save themselves. With those two exceptions, Jaheira can save all the prisoners while following all the other rules. But doing this requires a lot of very specific steps, so hang in there. First, I cast Light on Jaheira's Spell Sparkler to activate the Callous Glow Ring, since we're going to be relying on Magic Missile again. And we need a lot of movement speed, which is why Jaheira took Mobile as her third feat after hitting level 12, with Longstrider for another boost. Next is one of the key spells that makes this possible, Audilux's Freezing Sphere, specifically the portable version. I'm casting it now so I can start the 10-turn timer ticking while I quickly finish the rest of the prep. Spellcrux Amulet to restore the level 6 spell slot, then swap it for Psychic Spark. Enhanced Leap for longer jumps, and Haste for more haste. And since Jaheira has to do this all alone, Shadowheart is going to take a nap while she waits. Finally, I dash twice to triple Jaheira's movement speed up to 72 meters, and then click on the hatch. During this dialogue, the one timer that doesn't freeze is the Freezing Sphere. So I need to open a Mellowum's telepathic storefront and find the sphere in Jaheira's inventory. From here, I can watch the duration count down in real time until it reaches 2 turns, then quickly finish the conversation and start combat to stop the timer at 1 turn left. Use Click Heels from the Boots of Speed to bring Jaheira's movement up to 144 meters, and we're finally ready to head in. Most of the fish are guaranteed to die from 5 missiles as long as they're fully illuminated, and I'll fire off an extra missile to free just one of the Gondians, since if I free both at once, they like to clog up the ladder. Moving into the next room, it's time to make use of that 1-turn freezing sphere Jaheira is carrying around by dropping it right here in the water near the stairs. I'll free both of these 2 Gondians, but before moving on, I need to watch for the patrolling fish to walk to the far end of the hallway. Because when Jaheira gets near it, it'll start its turn in that position, far away from the prisoners. To stop the fish in this room from moving somewhere I don't want them to, I gotta use the lever to open the door, then click it again and quickly move through so that the door closes behind her. Though if I open either of these cells now, the Gondians will get attacked by these hunters, so they gotta stew in there for now while Jaheira ends her turn. The hunters will waste their turn dashing, the fish in the hallway will waste its turn dashing, and the prisoners I freed will run safely past the impending ice explosion. But the fish that spawn at the end of the turn order will pop out of the water right on top of it just before it goes off. The sphere does so much damage to the wet fish that in a normal playthrough they'd very likely die. But even if they don't, it doesn't matter, because Jaheira's spell DC is exactly high enough that they're guaranteed to slip on the ice when they try to move. Using click heals is essential on every turn, not only for the extra movement speed, but also to activate the free jump from wearing the Fleet Fingers gloves. Since Jaheira no longer has the extra speed from double dash, I need every bit of bonus movement speed that I can get. After opening up both of these cells, it's time to go finish off those 2 hunters who made it all the way over here but still couldn't get in range to attack any of the prisoners. So I'll hit each of them with 5 missiles, free the very patient Carolee, then move as far east as I can before ending the turn. On the 3rd turn, I'm gonna use the free jump to make progress into the east hallway, but the timing of when I jump is very important. I need to watch the patrolling fish in the far room and wait until it's just about to walk into the upper corner near the cell door. Then make the jump and quickly move forward to force it into combat and lock its position in that spot. Why? Because of illumination. As you can see, the champion is lightly obscured, so I need to move close enough to it for Jaheira's glowing weapon to light it up for the callous glow ring to do its job. Which means hitting it with a max level magic missile does a minimum of 93 damage, enough to kill the champion with 1 point to spare. I picked that particular spot to stop the hunter's patrol because it's already fully lit. If it was even a little farther over, I would have had to waste precious movement speed to get Jaheira in range to illuminate it. But from this current spot, I'm just close enough to use level 4 magic missile to open both of the cell doors while pumping 5 shots into the fish to take it out. And preserving that movement speed means Jaheira has just enough left over to run all the way back to this hall and close the door before ending her turn. Right on time to stop these fish from making it past the ice and causing any trouble. And now it's time for Duke Ravengard to save himself. He can move as far as this line right here without getting Mizora's attention. And from there, his high strength lets him jump across the room on top of this box to trigger the dialogue, where Mizora talks to Jaheira for some reason even though she's in another time zone. Since I pressured Will into breaking his contract, Mizora is going to meddle as much as possible, but that's all part of the plan. Up on that box, the spiders can't get close enough to hit the Duke. If he were to jump completely out of the room, the spiders would appear right on top of him, but jumping him into this particular spot will keep him safe while he wastes his turn kneeling. The ice patch is still in the way here, but Jaheira can just use her free jump to clear the whole thing and go interrupt Umeluum's dental appointment. Using Umeluum to teleport Jaheira to the sub would be against the rules, so she's going to leave the Mind Flayer here and keep on moving as far as she can. Since I closed that hallway door, all the fish are securely contained for the rest of the run, so the Gondians can all safely reach the ladder. But Duke Ravengard is still in hot water. If I am very careful with his movement, he can move away from the spiders without any opportunity attacks, then use dash and jump to make it all the way down the hall, where the spiders can't quite reach him. The final turn is easy, with Umeluum teleporting just itself to the submersible and Jaheira having way more than enough movement speed to run all the way up the ladders and wake up Shadowheart for the trip home. Ravengard uses jump again to make his way to safety while the last of the Gondians run in after him. And it seems that while Shadowheart was sleeping, she had a dream that she climbed down the ladder and actually did anything to help. But the Gondians know who the real hero is. Unfortunately, that positive attitude about Jaheira is about to change, since as soon as she kills one of the Black Gauntlets here in the Steelwatch Foundry, they drop a motivator, and disarming it requires passing a DC 5 intelligence check, which should be the easiest thing in the world for a wizard, but since Jaheira has such bad luck, all the Gondians are gonna explode. The motivator can't be moved or damaged with attacks. The Gondians can disarm it by attacking it, but they never will. They just stand around and wait until they blow up. Hey, don't blame me, the devs claim those kill switches don't work anymore after the Iron Throne. The only Gondian to survive will be Tubin, but taking him along would break the rules, so we're going to use the big bomb instead, as soon as we kill all these Bay Knights and grab the key to the control center. Now, Jaheira could just walk past the Hellfire Watchers and plant the bomb, but where's the sport in that? So let's move Shadowheart into the room and get this fight started. You'd think a giant metal monstrosity would be immune to confusion, but it works just fine. However, all the Steel Watchers are immune to psychic damage, so I'm gonna have to fall back on Ray of Frost, which gets the bonus from Evocation Wizard and from the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation. But to speed it up even more, she can use the Rain Dancer to make them wet for cold vulnerability. You might notice that getting it wet didn't give it lightning vulnerability. That's because all Steel Watchers are already vulnerable to lightning. But on Tactician and Honor, they are also resistant to lightning, which cancels it out. The regular Watchers will start the automatic detonation when they get low on health, but the Titan won't use its Bulwark or self-detonate because it needs to cast them on its turn, and it's never going to get one. After finishing out the other Hellfire Watchers, it's time to plant the bomb, for real this time. Outside, Jaheira gets to have a nice chat with Tubin, and only Tubin. Because if Wulbren was here, there'd be no way to keep Jaheira out of combat at the end of this conversation. So, I had to kill him. And Barkus. And all the other Iron Hands. It's a good day for Baldur's Gate, but a bad day for gnomes. I'm finally ready to take on Gortash, but Worm's Rock Fortress is on high alert after Jaheira went on her path of destruction. The guards in this place are a bit annoying to confuse because they're so spread out, but they're still easy to clear. Not only that, Jaheira will also be ignored by any of the traps in the audience hall, so she can just run around finishing off all the Bay Knights without setting any of them off. When we reach the office, Jaheira is going to walk in alone to have a chat with Gortash. And he'll yell and taunt and threaten Jaheira, but he's full of hot air. Because as soon as the conversation ends, he'll put her on the pay no mind list. Of course, Shadowheart is hostile to him, but she's still out of range for now, which gives me all the time I need to pull the usual light routine to strip away Gortash's legendary resistance, as well as destroy his buffing force curtain while leaving the debuffing one intact. As long as Shadowheart moves into the room along the red carpet, she won't be in range to trigger any of the traps, though Jaheira could also have just popped them all before the fight started. Gortash and his friends have just a little bit too much wisdom for Jaheira to confuse them for free, so she's going to have to start an impromptu ECW match to build up some acuity first. I need to take out all the guards before attacking Gortash, because once his health drops below 75%, he'll transform into Gortane and summon his ghost buddies. And if they see Jaheira kill one of the Bay Knights, they'll pull her into combat. Since that technically still happens very briefly, even when killing Gortash last, I've got another backup plan. First, I'll carefully chip away at Gortash's health until he goes below 34 hit points, which is the minimum damage possible from a freezing sphere, combined with the Callous Glow Ring and the vulnerabilities provided by the deranged force curtain. Next, Jaheira just needs to roll up a snowball and put it in Gortash's pocket, then run so far away that there's no one around to blame her when it goes off. But for some reason, the ghosts will accuse her of trespassing if she tries to walk out of the room. So I'll use Enhanced Leap and jump out the door to land way over here where they can't see her. Then Jaheira just needs to take a seat and wait. And now Jaheira can get her hands on and in Gortash's gloves, which we're going to need when we get to the House of Hope. Jaheira can reach Harlep's room by hopping over these rocks, but since Shadowheart ain't allowed to jump, we're going to need to use the trebuchet method again. After tossing her over the balcony, Jaheira is going to stay outside, while Shadowheart chats up Harlep alone, since anyone in range of the dialogue will end up in combat once the fight begins. Gortash's gloves pumps Jaheira's spell save DC up to 27, but Harlep has low wisdom, so he's easy to confuse. The real reason I needed the gloves was for access to the command spell. If Jaheira attacks after casting Confusion, she will go into combat, but Harlep will turn invulnerable until the next turn. And Command is the only spell Jaheira can use to prevent Harlep from reacting with Ethereal Escape. After poking him to death, we grab the key while Shadowheart moves way over here, before Jaheira opens the safe. Since she can't disarm the trap on the button, the imps will spawn in, but they'll ignore Jaheira and start Flying south for the winter? Though before we actually grab the hammer and trigger the alarm, we're gonna send Shadowheart all the way back to the entrance, while Jaheira handles the rest alone. Since all the NPCs that pop up after the alarm goes off are neutral to Jaheira, meaning she can walk right on by him or even stop to talk to him. Then head straight to the prison and rescue Hope. I know I said party followers are against the rules, but she's not going to actually do anything, just follow Jaheira around. And since party followers always take on the same faction as their controller, the enemies will ignore Hope too. Then we'll meet up with Shadowheart and say hello to Raphael, who really thinks he poses a threat to Jaheira. Yeah, those lazy bums didn't even try to stop her. While all the soul pillars are up, Raph gets a really annoying boost to his armor class, so Jaheira is going to do a little demolition work in here first to bring it down to a manageable level. His wisdom saves are surprisingly low, so he'll be a cinch to confuse, but it's still going to take a while to chew through his entire health pool. As soon as he goes down, Jaheira can already talk to Hope and brag about how easy it was. And since Corilla is still standing around, confused, Hope will be thrilled that we didn't kill her. But when we go ahead and kill her anyway and finish the fight, Hope will start the whole dialogue over again with Shadowheart, and this time she'll be sad that Corilla is dead. Grabbing Orin's Netherstone is our next objective, which means we need to head to the Murder Tribunal. And there are even some lines in this scene that can only be heard if Jaheira is the one to start the conversation.
In years past, you brought this man low, foiled his plot to become a god. Now you stand before him once again. Sarevok Anchev.
But in this case, Jaheira will always end up in combat once she's done exchanging insults with Sarevok. To avoid that, I need to send in Shadowheart to run the dialogue while Jaheira stays safely out of range. And I had planned to kill Sarevok, but you know what? Let's accept his offer instead. That way, Shadowheart can pretend to volunteer while Jaheira is the one to murder that annoying little elephant, which causes Jaheira to be the one to become the unholy assassin, leading to even more unique dialogue with Sarevok.
The Grand Harper, baptized in blood. What a sight to behold.
Sarevok. Baal's least favorite son. Still tied to Daddy's apron strings?
No more than you are, Harper, for you have been reborn, and in our service are we united, unholy assassin.
And if you're thinking that I did this to gain access to a certain piece of armor, well, think again. Since the aura of murder will only affect nearby enemies, it's useless to Jaheira. In the Baal Temple approach, Jaheira can leave Shadowheart behind and take a nostalgic trip down memory lane, though they're probably not great memories since she keeps getting surprised. Since we already killed Gortash, Shadowheart can save Lae'zel from Orin's optometry without any skill check and then get the fight going. But I forgot to long rest before coming here, so I only have one level 6 spell slot to use to confuse, which would be just big enough to hit the whole platform, but the game won't let me target the altar that's right in the middle. And I can almost get everyone inside the circle if I target Lae'zel, but no matter where I point the mouse, it doesn't quite work. If only she was just a little bit bigger. When I cast Enlarge on Lae'zel, her model becomes just big enough to let me target the exact spot I need. Confusion will also hit Lae'zel, but she's napping, so she won't notice. And the Chanters have Sanctuary, but just like before, Jaheira can just ignore it. However, if she kills either of these two while in melee range, those other cultists up on the ledge will accuse her of murder, which seems kinda hypocritical. So she'll need to use ranged attacks from over here. After clearing out all the minions, only Orin is left, and watch what happens when Jaheira attacks her. Orin's legendary action will trigger when she's hit by anyone within 4 meters, but the Sanguine Lash attack itself will only hit enemies. I mentioned earlier how the Ghost Mode trick wouldn't be enough to complete this challenge, and all these various legendary actions are why. Because if I try attacking Orin while in Ghost Mode instead of casting Confusion, Orin will turn hostile and her legendary action will hit Jaheira. Orin takes a while to kill since her uncanny dodge will be active the entire time, but she goes down eventually. Getting into Cazador's palace requires dealing with these guards, but the room is so small that it's impossible to confuse them without also hitting Shadowheart. So Jaheira is going to pull a shortcut to the entrance out of her bag of tricks. We don't get the key from the guard by doing this, but who needs it? Though before we actually take on Cazador, we should really go pick up Astarion, since he won't want to miss it. Oh, he won't be helping, just sitting in timeout and watching. After using light to remove Cazador's legendary resistance, Jaheira has just enough spell DC to confuse him. But he's got an irritating AC buff just like Raphael did, so let's take care of that first. Since each of the vampire spawn are trapped in the ritual as long as Cazador is alive, they can't fight back. So Jaheira doesn't even need to confuse them before turning each of them into a pile of ash. As soon as she stabs Cazador enough times, Jaheira can ignore all the other enemies and head straight to the coffin to finish him off. At this point, Astarion would try to take over, but he's still stuck in combat. And Jaheira gets a much more stylish staff to use from this point on. She also gets the Rhapsody Dagger, which means you may be thinking, Slim, you dummy, you should have come here first, so you could have used the Rhapsody buff to make everything else easier. But no, that won't work. Just like the Ballast armor, Rhapsody will only stack its buff if you use it to kill an enemy, and since everyone Jaheira kills is neutral, she can't get the buff. At this point, I just gotta confuse and kill the rest of the fodder to finish the fight. And speaking of being confused, if you talk to Astarion after the fight is over, he'll act like Cazador is still alive. But when you meet the Gur in the hallway, he'll confidently say that Cazador is dead. And when you get back to camp, Astarion will be shocked that you killed Cazador without him, even though he was about 5 meters away. Jaheira doesn't seem too thrilled about her reunion with Viconia, but we resolved Astarion's personal quest, so let's do Shadowheart the same favor. Viconia has high wisdom saves, so we'll need to build up a few stacks of acuity on the Sharans first. But even after landing Confusion, there's still another issue. Viconia has a unique version of Sanctuary that affects anyone that isn't an ally, which stops Jaheira from using her usual stabbing tactics. And this is why taking Acid Splash as one of her cantrips was so important. Jaheira has more than enough passive spell DC for this cantrip to hit every time, and since it's AoE, it can do damage through Sanctuary. But killing her with just Acid Splash would take a while, so let's speed up the process. With the Callous Glow Ring equipped, the radiant damage it adds to Acid Splash will cause Viconia's Radiant Retort to reflect force damage back to Jaheira, which will remove the Sanctuary. Now that damage could break Jaheira's concentration on Confusion, but that won't put her into combat. She'll just need to build up a few more stacks of Acuity before recasting it. Once she's down, it's time to deal with the real boss in this room, Lamona. Unlike all the other Sharans, she's temporarily hostile for some reason. And temp hostile is an exception to the exceptions about attacking neutral NPCs that are in combat with someone else. If Jaheira casts Confusion on Lamona, she will get pulled into the fight. So to take her down in one attack, we gotta pull the same routine that we did back on fake Jaheira. With this setup, the minimum magic missile damage adds up to exactly 101 hit points. But just like the last time, Jaheira will technically go into combat for a brief moment, leaving the ghost mode trick as the only backup option. And no, I won't be using the Mirror of Loss, because there's no way to get the buff without luck. Well, unless I saved the Necromancy of Thay all the way from Act 1 just for Jaheira to read, but who would do that? Now it's finally time to address the dragon in the room. If Jaheira talks to Ansur while Shadowheart is out of range, he'll act threatening in the dialogue, but then he'll just stand there, while Jaheira admires his lovely scales. Like everyone else, Ansur is not immune to Confused, which means he should be easy to beat. But if Shadowheart moves in range to start combat, Jaheira gets pulled into the fight too. Why? Because of this terrible hack that never got fixed. Anyone, anywhere inside this room gets put into the same combat group. If I put Jaheira into ghost mode before moving Shadowheart into range to start the fight, she will stay out of combat. Can I use this trick to take out Ansur? It looks like it's working, until it doesn't. Jaheira's first attack turns Ansur hostile, which means her second attack will activate his legendary action and put Jaheira into combat, just like I showed on Orin. If Shadowheart attacked first to trigger Ansur's reaction, I could do it, but that's against the rules. So as far as I know, Jaheira cannot beat Ansur without going into combat. That may be the end of Act 3, but we're not really done until we deal with that big brain. Unfortunately, for all you Shadowheart fans, she has to volunteer to become a Mind Flayer, since that's the only way we can avoid taking along a party follower. As well as needing we see it, Jaheira. You can stop pointing. Since the Emperor is still following us around after that, Jaheira's gotta attack him to get rid of him. And once we reach High Hall, if Jaheira leaves Shadowheart back here and heads up alone to trigger the Voss encounter, the dialogue will still start back on Shadowheart, which keeps Jaheira out of range of the conversation and thus out of combat, even though she's standing right in Voss's face. This also lets her cast Confusion on all the Gith without needing to dodge Shadowheart. After Jaheira makes her rousing motivational speech, we need to get through the courtyard to reach the brainstem. And Jaheira can walk around confusing the enemies on the way, but she'd run out of spell slots long before clearing them all. Thankfully, she can just walk past them and up to the brainstem by herself, where her spider sense will still go off when the Netherbrain talks to her, even though she has no tadpole. And clicking on the brainstem will automatically send both her and Shadow Tentacles to the top of the brain. But the scripters worked hard to ensure that there is no way to beat the brain while staying entirely out of combat the whole time. And Shadowheart has to cast Karsus's Compulsion to reach the second part of the fight at all. However, Jaheira and I devised a tactic for the fight that stays within the spirit of the challenge rules as much as possible. To do this, we gotta rewind back to the beginning of the courtyard. Since the fight starts as soon as Jaheira clicks the brainstem, I need to cast Enhanced Leap on Shadowheart and Jaheira before heading off. But since those buffs will run down in real time, I also need to quickly stack Dash to 3 and enter turn-based mode to suspend the timers. Then use Click Heals and run as far as I can toward the stem. I can leave turn-based mode to keep moving, but once I do that, the race is on. Since entering turn-based mode while this far away from Shadowheart won't put her in the turn order anymore. I need to reach the top, cast another 3 dashes, and disengage, then quickly click the stem before any of the buffs run out. Once on top of the brain, Jaheira's high movement speed and disengage let her run right past all the enemies to reach the crown. And popping up those tentacles makes it easier to aim the very precise jump Shadowheart needs to make right into this spot, where she won't get hit with any opportunity attacks when she lifts off to fly the rest of the way to the crown, moving as far toward the back of the platform as possible. At this point, Shadowheart casts Karsus's Compulsion, but to keep them both safe while the channel completes, Jaheira needs to cast Invisibility on Shadowheart and herself. But before she does, she needs to use her bonus action to cast Misty Step to bait out the counterspells from all the Mind Flayers in range. With it now safe to cast, we apply Invisibility, move Jaheira away from where Shadowheart is standing, then end their turns. The two Super Daisies can get in range to detect us, but here's the thing. Detecting presence costs a bonus action, which they just used up by casting Misty Step. So all they can do is look around in circles for my characters without actually finding them, which removes their ghostly after images, making all the other NPCs give up the hunt. So after that, all the enemies just pass their turns and Shadowheart's channel completes, sending her to the final battle while leaving Jaheira all alone on top of the brain. After using Misty Step to bait out Counterspell again, Jaheira has one spell left that she needs to cast to complete this challenge. And it's Polymorph. On herself. This is why I set her Wisdom to 8 way back at the beginning, so that she would fail this saving throw against her own spell. As soon as Jaheira turns into a sheep, you see that she immediately left combat. What is going on here? I'll explain it in detail in just a minute, but for now, let's go take out that nether brain. Jaheira can just walk through the portal, hop right up to the brain, and start stabbing. The first attack will still trigger a brainquake, which could do as much as 60 damage, but I planned from the start to have enough health just to survive this one hit. After that, Jaheira can just keep attacking the brain until it dies. She might not have been able to start this fight out of combat, but it is how she finished it. With that, the challenge is complete, so if you don't care how that sheep trick worked, then thanks for watching. If you do, then strap in. Normally, whenever the last player character has gone through the portal into the final brain room, any enemies still left on top of the brain are removed from combat. That happens because of this script that checks if there are no players inside the trigger that covers the top of the brain. Once that's true, this second part activates, which checks for anything else that is still on top of the brain and not only removes them from the current fight, but also prevents them from going into combat again no matter what they do or what's done to them. This is the same state that's set onto Arabella that lets her zombie attack NPCs with no reaction, and set onto Balthazar, which lets you attack him with no reaction if you misty step through his closed door, and set onto Jaheira that let her attack the Netherbrain without being in combat. But how did turning her into a sheep do this? The reason Proxy's Pixie Port lets you fast travel out of danger zones is because whenever you're polymorphed, the game's scripting stops tracking what triggers you're inside, essentially erasing your current location. So as soon as Jaheira turned woolly, this bit of script was satisfied and moved on to part 2. But if Sheep Jaheira isn't considered to be on top of the brain at this point, then why is she affected by the second script that only targets anything that's within that trigger? That's where this trick really threads the needle. Being polymorphed is enough to fool the game's scripting into thinking Jaheira left the area. But when you use this command to ask the game engine where Jaheira really is, it will tell the truth. Which is how Jaheira manages to be not on top of the brain and on top of the brain at the same time. And yes, this Schrodinger's sheep trick can be done with any character in a normal playthrough, assuming they don't make their saving throw. Thank you very much for watching. And extra special thanks to my Patreon supporters who hung in there while I took forever to finish this video. You know, one of the things I put on that page is behind the scenes write-ups about each video, and I'm going to have a lot to say about this one. So if you enjoy reading giant nerdy walls of text, then you might want to become a member. Thanks again.